All right, so we're back with another episode of the Niche Marketing Podcast, and this one's particularly exciting for me because I get to do it with a longtime friend of mine, Nate Broughton. We're here in San Diego. Nate, so excited to have you, man. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Hey, I'm excited to see you. It's been a while.
Absolutely. So when I was thinking through relationships I have with expertise in the mortgage space and people that know what it takes to generate leads in the space, you were, of course, one of the first guys I thought of, and again, was so thrilled that you agreed to be on the show. Before we get into some of the nooks and crannies of mortgage marketing, could you first maybe talk about yourself a little bit, your exposure to the space, and how you're working with companies to help in lead gen?
Sure. Yeah, mortgage is one of the verticals or niches that's near and dear to my heart, obviously, going back over 20 years now. So, and it's changed a lot over those 20 years. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, it's one that I got started in when I was still in college back in Missouri. So we started online, kind of the Wild West days of internet marketing. My mentors and the guys that I worked for, we had a ticket business that was going pretty well. And but they knew that they were going to exit that business because they probably weren't going to last forever. And I think one of their buddies just mentioned how he closed a loan and made $5,000 and how great it was. So they just being the entrepreneurs that they were, kind of looked into that space. And I was the digital marketing kind of young kid that was learning all the tricks and tips to kind of do whatever they wanted to do on the business side, find the customers or the leads online. So we just dipped our toe in kind of without knowing where it would go. And it went really well. And I remember setting up websites for loan types that I didn't even know what they were. I didn't know what an FHA loan was or a VA loan or a jumbo loan, but we had websites for all those things. And that was 20 years ago. And, it started off slow and we started doing really well with organic SEO and generating a lot of leads. And that led to starting our own mortgage bank and our own mortgage lead gen company. And over the course of several years, that grew into one of the largest private companies in Missouri. And I was the CMO of that business for some time and exited that, personally exited it. The business is still around this day. A lot of my friends that used to work for me or were interns or were coworkers still run that business. And I still have a close relationship there, which I know we can talk about. But yeah, I had about an 8 or 9 year run in the mortgage space there. And then left, and then I've always dipped my toe back into mortgage and also other types of lead gen over the last 10 years or so here in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And in the last year and a half or so, I've been actively involved again in kind of just front end kind of audience generation and lead generation in the mortgage space.
Awesome. And what are some of the other verticals that you play in the lead gen space?
We've done a lot in insurance. So we had our own insurance agency that we started in Missouri that was all online that went really well, and we sold that to a carrier. But after that, I got into a couple different types of insurance lead gen, like Medicare, term life, a few others. And then we had eligibility.com, which did some insurance lead gen and then also a lot of attorney lead gen. So kind of your bread and butter, highly competitive, finance and attorney lead gen.
Yeah, not the sexiest stuff, but that's how you know it's super lucrative, right?
Indeed, yeah. And it mixes all the tactics as well. Like there's like your standard tactics, and then there's your like mid-tier tactics, and there's a lot of like shady stuff that goes on in all those spaces, just because they're highly lucrative and highly competitive. So you get exposed to that a bit, and it's good to know what some of those things are, so you can kind of steer clear of them, and also like maybe buyer beware a bit in some of those places, especially in mortgage.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlight the competitiveness of the space. I think, that just really shows that if you're going to step into this niche, you better be prepared for quite the fight and really know what you're doing. And again, that's why we're thrilled to have you speaking to that. So before we start to get into some of the actual tactics that help with mortgage lead generation, let's talk about the key players in the space. Just, for those that are newer to the space, like just assume relatively brand new, maybe they've never even actually gone through the mortgage process themselves, but they know it's a lucrative space. Maybe they have some relationships. They feel like they can play there. Maybe it's just a job opportunity they have where they found themselves in where they're working for a mortgage company or think they might be able to or want to sell leads to a mortgage company. someone wants to get in, talk us through basically the key players and what kind of the hierarchy looks like in the space.
Okay. I'm envisioning one of those big poster boards,
Yeah, like
you
an
know, one of
org
those
chart.
things everywhere, right? Like, 'cause
Exactly.
there's a lot. I mean,
Yep.
on the very front end, if you got hired by a local mortgage bank or you wanted to get licensed as an independent mortgage broker, I mean, you can go out and use the platforms that are familiar to you, like Google Ads and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and buy traffic or try to generate your own traffic to your own website there. So those tools are like sign up, do your own marketing, get leads, and try to bring them in the door. There are also, like, historically a lot of direct mail competitive places you could go and work to get leads. I don't have a lot of experience in direct mail. I don't know how well it's going these days, but I know there are still volume direct mail vendors out there. So to kind of highlight a couple of those early on and say those are options. Start your own stuff. Go to a direct mail service provider. But I think the bread and butter of mortgage lead gen, like players and like types of vendors that are out there, are like the digital lead gen ones, like a Lending Tree, like an MRC, which is the group in Columbia that in Missouri that I'm like close with and kind of spurted out of our mortgage bank. So they're kind of their own Lending Tree.
And can you buy leads from Lending Tree? You know,
Absolutely, yeah. Lending Tree, Bankrate, and then a couple other little platforms. Like if you go out and just Google mortgage lead gen providers, which most people would do anyway, you're probably going to be familiar with a Lending Tree or a Bankrate. You may not know like an MRC, but and there's probably 3 or 4 other ones on down the pike, like a Go Banking Rates or someone like that has leads available. And these are like the top tier providers that have a brand, and you go look at their website and you're like, I may have heard of this before. And this looks like there's a lot of different associations and trust symbols and things on this site. Like, this is a legit company. Like, I think there's a handful, maybe 6 to 10 of those like pure top tier lead gen providers that are marketplaces and function that way, where you just say, hey, I'm John, I'm a mortgage broker in Philadelphia. I want to buy leads from my area because I'm licensed in, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Delaware, and I want to buy leads that are this credit type, this loan size, maybe in these areas, a couple other things. And you can kind of create, go on the menu, pick what you want, and get those leads posted to you from those vendors. And those leads can come in via email. They can get posted directly into your CRM if you're using something like that. Depending on how technically savvy you are, you may kind of not know how you're going to get the leads to come in. And there's also a lot of like, you can just buy live transfers and direct dials these days as well. So kind of anything and everything that you can think of now, 20 years hence from when all this kind of started, you can kind of get and do and choose from the menu.
Yeah. And what would you say, I hate to have you paint with too broad of a brush here, but what would you say the quality of those leads are? And, I mean, if it's as easy as just going to Lending Tree, putting in your filters and, putting in a coin and pulling the lever and getting a lead out, why isn't everybody doing it? And I guess to some extent, everybody is doing it. That's why Lending Tree's huge.
Sure.
But I mean, tell me about the lead quality and how that might compare to, if you were to try to do it yourself.
It's all over the board, and we can talk about how to kind of evaluate that and position yourself to deal with it. But, I was going to say, there's those top tier providers, and there's also like a mid tier of providers. And these are like names that, I just make them like todaysrates.com. Like, they change every 3 or 4 years. There's a bunch of different networks that will sell you leads that look a lot like a Lending Tree that we're using kind of as our like big brand. But they are not necessarily, and they fall down that quality train. So it's almost hard to kind of explain in a short little audio montage here of like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, but they're all kind of out there, and you need to kind of evaluate them based on just your own judgment of like, if you were looking at buying flights from a website or something like that, or something more consumery, like, is this big? Do they have a lot of testimonials, et cetera? And this one seems a little interesting, and maybe it's a little too good to be true, but they said they have unique leads in my area. Maybe I should check them out. Like, there's probably going to be a quality spectrum that's going to fall down pretty quickly based on things that you could probably just intuit by looking around. But yes, lead quality is the only thing that matters, right? Like, it doesn't, because the pricing, it can go, I'll pay $250 for an exclusive mortgage lead in my area. And that's a big thing too, exclusivity, right? Am I the only one getting this lead? Is that true? Let's find out. But that drives a lot of the pricing. So even if you go to a vendor like a Lending Tree and say, I want exclusive mortgage leads in the areas that we just talked about of a certain credit type, there's going to be kind of like a marketplace pricing on that. That is sometimes dynamic to the point of like down to the minute and when you want to bid on it. But let's, for simplicity's sake, say I'll pay $250 for a mortgage lead that's exclusive in my area and meets all these criteria.
Fairly standard price.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a little high, but I mean, that's not, we're talking leads are getting up into that range for sure. A couple $100 for a quality verified mortgage lead is not unheard of these days.
And I wanted to ask you about lead pricing, and we kind of segued directly into it. So while we're on the subject, what's the most the most expensive mortgage lead you've ever seen sold, and like why was it that expensive?
That's a good question.
Because and the reason this is relevant is like, if you're a marketer and you're thinking, geez, how much could I sell these for? And I'm sure ultra premium leads are very hard to come by, but let's just assume you're able to pull it off. Yeah. What's an ultra premium lead go for?
I don't know. I would say $300 to $500. I've never seen anything beyond that.
Okay.
I think you'd think there could be the potential to be like, well, I'll pay $1,000 for that lead because it checks all these boxes. I don't know. That's like almost a task to put out to the marketplace. Like, who could create the perfect lead?
Maybe that's your future.
I mean, the most valuable lead is, a borrower that's already worked with you, right? That you like that's the premium leads. And that's what a lot of independent mortgage brokers or someone starting over don't really have. But you can kind of do that math over time. And there's a lot of things to think about in approaching mortgage lead gen and being a mortgage broker and buying leads that are like, I'm investing over time in this, where it's like, maybe I bought some shitty leads, but, I got 5 decent leads and I closed one, and maybe that one's going to be a borrower that's going to come back to me down the line too. So I think that's something that a lot of people have trouble with because they look at it so transactionally, where they're like, well, LendingTree, I gave you $15,000 and I only closed 2 loans. I made $16,000. So that's not going to work for me. I can't work for 2 months and only make $1,000. A lot of people get burned out pretty quick in mortgage lead gen because they don't have the stomach or the wherewithal, the approach, or maybe even just the cash flow or the budget to deal with the fact that not only is the industry always going to be going like this, and we know right now it's down, but talking today in nearly March 2023, but also like it's tough to sit there and be like, I'm going to buy leads for 1 week and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go good, then this is worthless. And I hate LendingTree. Like it's very difficult to approach it that way. So I don't know. Maybe we can talk more about how to do that, but that's certainly what I see a lot of.
Yeah. So totally off the cuff, unscripted question here, but you made me think of it. If I'm capable of generating mortgage leads on my own or through my own team, can I actually sell them to the teams that sell mortgage leads? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could sell leads to LendingTree if they're good enough, and then they'd resell them?
I would think so, yeah. I mean, like they've certainly, that's how they get most of their leads, right? Certainly from lead gen affiliates, but also from people who are like, I don't know, I guess you'd be like, I'm not working this lead. Take it, sell it to someone else. That's interesting.
Interesting. That's the types of nooks and crannies we like to get into on this podcast.
Yeah.
So, all right. Speaking of nooks and crannies, let's start to get into the marketing stack, tech stack, marketing stack. Essentially, the things you need to have in place to start to do this. Again, if let's assume that you're a mortgage company, you're sick of paying the lead gen providers, and you at least want to start to generate some leads on your own. And I guess there's the usual suspects. And you touched on this a bit earlier, but again, what are the foundational elements I need to have in place before I start getting fancy?
That's a very common situation that you just described. I mean, every mortgage broker out there is like, I'm sick of these vendors. I'm sick of paying for them. These leads aren't exclusive. I'm not closing them. I want to generate my own, from the largest mortgage lenders in the country to the mom and pops for sure. So I think this is something that people debate a lot and want to know how to do. Most of them, if you've been buying leads from anyone, you've probably got a somewhat decent tech stack to manage lead flow. And that I think is important because you have to have like a CRM of some type, and you can't really be a mortgage broker these days without having some sort of like digital like loan processing system. But also, and most of those integrate with kind of a CRM lead management system. So I'm going to assume you probably have something already where you're like, I can get leads from someone,
even if it's my referral network.
Right, yeah. And they're coming in and they're getting piped into the CRM, and we know how to work them, and they're getting called and they're getting passed on to the loan management or loan processing system. So I assume you probably have some sort of CRM-y place where leads are posting into. But if you want to go out and start generating some of your own, most of that comes on the front end. So the tech stack and the marketing stack is more, it's more your own website, your own ability to go out and A/B test content, ads, buy and manage ads if you're doing paid traffic, and then also just write content and test it and track it as far as how it's performing against competition. So if we're talking about kind of front end digital marketing, then launching a marketing campaign, you need to have probably a couple of SEO tools to like go out and research and plan. So I'm sure SEMrush or Ahrefs are some that you've mentioned here on the podcast. You need to have at least, I assume you have a website that you're able to put content on, but you need to have a website that's decent looking and has the ability to create content because you want to track search traffic. And then from there, it's more just kind of the know-how of knowing what to write and how to research it.
Which gets back to that SEO.
Right, yeah. And I've had this conversation with many mortgage brokers. I was at a conference last summer and talked to a lot of them. And there's successful groups out there that are like, I've got a $20 million company. And I've got 20 mortgage brokers. And I only buy my leads from the vendors. And I'm frustrated by that. I feel beholden to them. Even if the quality is decent and the ROI is positive, it's still like they could just turn off the spigot, right? I could be in trouble. So I need to generate some of my own. And I know how to get agent referrals, and that's kind of happening. And maybe I'm like a regional player, but what can I do to go out there and compete against the guys that have their own websites that are generating traffic or are getting the leads piped into them from those sites that are already out there? And to do that, I mean, it's going to take some investment, and you're going to need some tools, like I mentioned.
Yep.
But you're also going to need more just the know-how and the patience. I think that's what really I think is important is know-how, patience, budget.
All right. So you've got the site, you're creating content, you've got some ad dollars. Where are you putting the ad dollars to drive traffic?
I would think most of them are going to Facebook still.
And do you endorse that?
Yeah, I think it's maybe the only place you can go. I mean, I think you can compete and go like top tier search Google ads. You just have to be really smart. And if you're a regional player, you certainly cannot compete with the top tier people for FHA loan rates keyword on Google right now. You will get destroyed.
And you're competing with the same people you're buying the leads from.
Right, yeah. And they're buying them from 3 other guys that are selling to them. And then you've also got banks, big mortgage banks competing against you that can lose money. Like, they don't care. And even like affiliate. I mean, there are some like affiliate groups out there. Like the guys down in Puerto Rico, which, they don't pay taxes. So you're fucked there too. You can't compete with them. Sorry about cussing on your podcast.
That gives it some flavor.
There we go. But yeah, you're competing against people where like the deck is stacked against you in some of those places. So you got to find little nooks and crannies where you can compete. And I think it's a little bit easier on Facebook because you can target the individual and the consumer and like likes and interests. And or maybe you have an audience that you can upload to either of these platforms, but to Facebook more specifically, customers who've already engaged with you. So that gives you a little bit of like, all right, let's go out and try to find some of these same people.
And when you say Facebook, you're implying Instagram as well?
Yeah, for sure.
And you see those as more or less of equal value when it comes to Facebook skews a little older, so maybe.
That's true. I would think Facebook more likely the place where you'll find actual quality mortgage leads.
No, but both.
Yeah, for sure. Instagram. I mean, of all the like independent mortgage brokers I've talked to in the last couple of years, I think most of them are finding success on Facebook and with just long tail local organic search. That's their best bets. And or partnerships with like local real estate agents or groups or like the local paper. I don't know. I think there's some cool ways we can maybe talk about trying to find buckets of traffic that exist where your customers are hanging out, where maybe there's not like already a mortgage lead form, or someone's maybe not thinking about going after that because it's too small for the big guys to deal with.
Well, while we're on that,
sure.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, I think that's an interesting little corner to dive into. Where might the big guys be ignoring opportunity where you've seen it in the past?
I was just looking at something yesterday where I was surprised no one had gone to. And this is in like the VA loan niche where like the mortgage bank that I help grow is like the largest VA loan bank in the country. And I still have a relationship with them and like we're buying up a bunch of sites. But there are a bunch of like VA housing and base housing websites. I found a network of them. There were probably 50. There could be 100. And I just found them I was poking around looking at like pay rates for military folks and housing. And I just started seeing all these URLs for like xxxbasehousing.com. And you could tell that these are stamped out for every single base around the country. But they just had a link for like advertise, find a real estate agent. And it was clearly just ran by some guy who built these sites 15 years ago. No lead gen going on them. And
hoping someone like you would come knocking, probably, right?
Probably, especially today more than ever. I think I've seen this a lot in the last handful of years where, site owners, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I don't know why necessarily they would be more averse to this, but I definitely have seen it more in the past handful of years where it's like, let me help you monetize your site. Like I'm a local mortgage broker. I've been around for 5 years. Here's my licenses. Here's whatever. I've got a system in place where you can just pop these leads over to me. I know I can pay you $50 a lead. Let's do a little test. Let's add it to these pages of your site. Let's create 10 new pieces of content for xxxhousing.com that explain like what is a VA loan, what is the VA loan limit in X county next to X base. Like maybe he doesn't have content for that yet. You could author that content as local mortgage broker B and place that on his site. That would have a good chance of ranking organically for long tail organic search. And then you'd have your little lead forms on there and post that over. Little things like that are out there. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a housing site specific to the military. It could be like just a local, it could be san diego.com. I don't know, right? Like these things are out there where if they're not like out there buying traffic themselves, if they're not a site that gets 100,000 visits a month, like the bigger guys aren't really paying attention to these. And I think you can go out and kind of strike up those partnerships the same way you would strike up an old school partnership, just by reaching out and saying you're local and saying you can help and pick up your little crumbs that way. That's certainly a way to, like, if you were buying 1,000 leads a month, well, that sounds like a lot. If you're buying 100 leads a month from a vendor, and all you need to do is, get 30 leads a month from somewhere else to spread yourself out a bit. Now 30 of your 130 leads are not coming from the vendor that's going to hold you hostage. It's little things like that I think can
hedge.
Work.
Yeah, you're hedging. This is good stuff, man. You eat, sleep, and breathe this, but probably a lot of.
I think it's subconscious. I don't think about it that much.
There's a lot of mortgage companies out there going, "Who's this guy?" That's Nate Broughton in San Diego.
We may have met at a bar in Michigan.
If you met Nate, it's probably at a bar.
Exactly.
Right. All right. So some of the things you're touching on there with the independent content sites makes me think of this topic that we bat around through email. I believe you referred to it as co-registration. Could you define that a little bit? Explain what you mean by that and how that strategy works? And
sure. And this is an older internet strategy, I would say. So it's one that's been around and is not specific to mortgage, but the concept of it I think is helpful for sure. And like thinking about how can I scrape together mortgage leads from places that are unique. So co-registration is fundamentally, it's like you go to a website, you sign up for your local paper. So you're like, well, enter your email. You want to be a subscriber? You're like john.bertino@theagencyguide.com. And they say, all right, thank you. You're subscribed. And, oh, John, are you also interested in, free wings from Chili's or early access to Eagles tickets, like those offers.
Yes, and yes.
Yes, of course.
Does it have to be Chili's though?
I was trying to think of a chain because I don't know any Philly wing joints.
A Dirty Birds.
Dirty Birds. I almost wore a Dirty Birds t-shirt today. But
Did you?
Like, I should go all black for you.
You did.
But yeah, it's that concept of you sign up for one thing and then you kind of get shown some other offers. And then sometimes it's a little like sleazier and you're like, I don't want, coupons to this or checkboxes.
Yeah, how do you make it not sleazy? That's got to be a big part of this, I would think.
I think it depends on where you are and how relevant it is. So like a big example, relevant example might be like, or parallel example would be like a marketbeat.com. It's a stock newsletter. And this is big in finance. I know a guy that owns a big co-reg network in finance because it's like you're signing up for the Motley Fool or MarketBeat. And they're like, well, would you also be interested in coverage of, South American emerging stocks and crypto like that? I mean, that was the big one, right? You're like, oh, you're interested in stocks? Well, don't you want to follow crypto? Are you interested in NFTs like checkbox? And you're co-registering for that company or website's email list, basically. So now you're saying, yes, raise my hand. I'm down to get emails about crypto and NFTs, etc. after I just signed up for MarketBeat. And the co-registration part is like you're opting into their terms. Now they have the opportunity to market to you, and they're paying they're paying market beat in the end, but there's usually a middleman network involved that's kind of providing the technology and saying to crypto folk, if you want to get new subscribers, I have access to Market Beat's thank you page and someone else's thank you page. You pay me $3, I pay Market Beat $1.50, and you're going to get people all day long that sign up here. That's co-registration.
Okay, very good. And is it something that you feel is gaining steam, gaining momentum, or it's just always been there and it's underutilized? Or
Co-reg is as like just a fundamental thing. I think it's just kind of static and doing its thing. But I think what we were kind of talking about a bit over email is I've seen it in mortgage lead gen, and I think this could be applied to other verticals as well, grow in the last handful of years. So a good example might be a real estate, like a home search site. You're looking for homes for sale in Philly, under $400,000. You're probably going to end up at like a Zillow or a Realtor.com, but they're on down the list. Like there's only a few of those big brands on down that list. Homes.com, Homefront.com, a couple of names that we're just making up, right? Homeownership.org. You end up on those sites and they've got listings and they've got inquiry forms, and their main business model is to sell like buyer and seller leads, primarily buyer leads, to agents. So agents are going to homeownership.com and they're saying, I want to work with buyers in the area. You have listings, put me up there. And or when they fill out the form, they come to me, I give them a call and I say, hey, you need help finding a house. I saw you were searching on homeownership.org. I've seen a lot of mortgage lead gen where they've just gotten on the back end of those flows, similar to co-reg. So as we were just kind of describing signing up for Market Beat, that shows interest and intent in investing. And therefore you're also likely interested in crypto and whatever else, depending on the seasons and the markets. If you're interested in a home, finding a new home, you're most definitely going to be interested in financing that in some way, shape, or form, i.e. a mortgage lead. So there's opportunities to find home search sites and say, hey, Mr. Home Search Site owner, if you're selling leads to real estate agents for $25 pop, why don't we get on the back end of that flow? Checkbox, or answer question. And if those things light the lamp in the right way, I'll pay you another $25 because now I've got a borrower that's potentially interested.
Yeah, and you're throwing the ball to where the receiver is going. So how do you get these publishers to be interested? Is it simply a financial incentive, or is there other things you have to offer them? And I think there's probably also an art and a science to like reaching out to them in the first place. Is it something you have to do at scale? Talk me through some of the trials and tribulations with getting these publishers to opt into the co-reg and become your strategic partner.
It depends on who you are. If you're kind of starting from scratch, I mean, hopefully if you're an independent mortgage broker, and that's kind of the example we're giving, I mean, hopefully you got some credibility as like a local business owner and a track record of servicing borrowers. You're going to lean on the fact that you're, a legitimate company that has helped people and you've got relevant experience of X number of years. But I think that's mostly, and then the example I was describing earlier of I've bought leads online for 10 years from these vendors, right? So I know how to bring leads in and work them. I think that's really important in making partnerships work, because they want to know if they're going to spend the time to like integrate with you and set up a partnership that 2 months later you're not going to call them back to lead suck by. So I think showing some sort of like staying power, both as a business and as someone who has worked online leads before, is probably the best approach. I'm not saying all the publishers are necessarily savvy enough to even know these things, but that's the way to go into it and say, I know the space a bit, and I want to be scrappy and inventive and interesting. And if you want to work with me, like it's better than working even with a lending tree, because I'm going to, call these leads myself, or my team is local or regional, and we're going to do a better job. And yeah, I can match the dollar amount that they're going to pay potentially, which may not always be the case, but I think it's more just a kernel of an idea and seeing it work, or at least me describing it and maybe going out and then seeing it work. And I've seen it work many places. No, that it's possible. And it's more just kind of finding the little nooks and crannies of places to approach and set up that relationship there. I don't think there is necessarily a playbook other than good old fashioned deal making in that sense.
Okay. So if you're the marketing lead gen provider, once you get the form fill and sell that lead, I suppose ultimately your job is done.
Mhm.
But if you're the mortgage company and you're generating these for yourself, after you've generated the lead, you still have to nurture that opportunity.
Yeah.
So could you speak to that a little bit in terms of what you've seen work or best practices or just how to increase your conversion rate ultimately from a form fill to a qualified lead that you're ultimately servicing?
That's a really good question, actually, and an insightful one, because a lot of people mess that up. And part of it is like, well, I bought the leads suck, leads go in trash. It's like, you bought those things. There's a lot of things you can do with those, not just in like providing your primary service, but also to try to remonetize them or continue to incubate them and nurture them. But the primary answer to your question is like, what can you do to like compete with in online lead gen and make sure convert that lead from a inbound lead to a qualified lead? It's speed to call. It's like always going to be number one, and versions of that and derivatives of that have come up. So it's like, lead comes in, you better call as soon as possible. Be obsessed with that. You have to be, even if it's an exclusive lead. That exclusive lead just means it came into a website and it's coming to you through there, and they're not selling it somewhere else.
Right.
It doesn't mean Joey Consumer didn't go somewhere else 10 seconds later and fill it out, right? So he's still looking around, and you need to get him on the phone. You need to, I know texting is always iffy, but like if you can text them right away and like, we're going to call you, or we're calling you right now, we're texting you right now. Like if you got that machine in place and we're emailing you, get all up on them very quickly. That's always going to be your best bet. Find the ones that have high intent, that have just filled the form, get them on the phone, get them before someone else does. Speed to call, speed to contact. Most important.
And there's a bit of a chicken and egg when it comes to these types of things of like, you talk about, or at least you allude to the fact of concentrating your time into the leads that are most valuable, right? So you're not wasting time. But there's this chicken and egg factor of, well, you don't want to ask a lot of questions up front on the initial form fill, because then you're not going to fill them out. They're going to go, what is this crap? They're going to exit the window. So it's almost like you ask them less to get the information in the first place, but then you have to qualify it somehow to decide it's worth your time. It's a pretty nuanced question. I don't know if you have any insights.
In most mortgage lead providers and generators and networks, you're right. They are coming through with only X fields. They've been kind of whittled down to
intentionally
name, credit score, sort of interested, right? Like, you're right. Yeah, you don't get a ton. There are some tech. There's like instant. There's like an Experian and some similar platforms where you can like verify credit like instantaneously, and all these CRMs and these lead management systems have like scoring tied to them as well. So if you start to compete in this and get a little savvy, hopefully you're scoring leads the second they come through too. And that can be like kind of your own secret sauce, and it probably is. You need data from like loan closes to the loan officer that worked them, to the other, the size of the loan, the credit score, like the time it took from the lead to the close, and you're starting to learn and kind of creating an algorithm that's going to score these leads the second they kind of hit your system. And if you're operating at scale, that's certainly a thing, because you want to get not only speed to contact, but you want to get the right person on the phone, right? So you want to make sure A+ lead goes to A+ mortgage broker in 2 seconds. And yeah, that's certainly a thing too.
Yeah, well, so, and you talk about speed to call. Is that as simple as like, you just have to have your reps on standby, or is call centers are the name of the game in the space, right?
I think for most it can be. Yeah, you've got an outsourced call center to qualify and pass over.
Okay, so that's where your qualification happens.
Likely. Or you've got like new trainees that are not licensed yet, or maybe recently licensed, and they're kind of sitting there working the phones to get their reps in. You've got maybe people on a different compensation scale that are not licensed loan officers, but they're like call qualifiers in-house, especially if you live in like a small town like a Columbia. We had a lot of that too. But yeah, one way, shape, or form, you got to staff that, have that person on the line, outsourced or something, doing qualification. Yeah.
By any chance, any recommendations or favorite? You mentioned some of the CRMs in the space, or I don't know if there's other tech that you're often bolting on. Not to put you on the spot if you don't have any tech that you are adamant about, but if you do, I'd be curious to know.
I don't really. We kind of had our homegrown solutions a lot over the years, both in my projects and at the mortgage bank for a long time. I know that as they got larger, they had to switch to something else for compliance, and I struggle for the name because a lot of them sound the same. On the front end, like lead gen side, like Leadspedia is a good vendor. There's only a few, and that's like if you want to ingest leads, figure out maybe how to score them, and or have like a routing system before they come into your CRM. That might be a place or a piece of software you would need. I like them a lot. They're still like a privately held company that's fairly small. Bobberdo is one that's very popular in the insurance industry that I know still is used in mortgage. Bit of a goofy name.
They're pulling in first and third party data to layer on top of the.
Well, no, they're more just like you can post from a vendor into like a Leadspedia and churn it a bit to decide if you want to post it into your CRM. Like, I don't know. And some people like the Leadspedia is almost if you want to have more of your mortgage lead gen business. If you want to manage leads, spit leads out to different places, that software is helpful for that. It's almost more like a clearing house for that data.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I would say just mortgage specific CRM software that you probably are required to have is likely going to be a place where you could do a lot of this stuff. But sometimes those marketing platforms work, like some of the scoring that we were talking about. Maybe that's easier in a Leadspedia versus some of the platforms. Yeah, at this point, I'm not sure what advantages some of those platforms provide, just because I haven't played with them.
Yeah. Okay, cool. One last area I don't think we really dug into too much is this idea of basically microsites. So microsites are kind of one of the older tricks in the book at this point. But do you see those as absolutely necessary? Do you have any tips on how to throw up quick microsites or landing pages, how to not make them look, too low quality or untrustworthy, which is certainly going to be key in the space, but just curious to get your quick take on a microsite or niche landing page strategy.
I think that's what a lot of like small independent brokers are basically kind of putting up, and beyond maybe even just their own company site. Yeah, maybe you want to do a couple derivatives of that where you're going after, I don't know, some like niche in the market, right? Like construction flips or like relocation. That might be a good one, right? So you're a local mortgage broker in San Diego, and you know that a lot of people move to San Diego as opposed to maybe moving in and around it. And you want to go after the people that move here, or at least they used to until they all started to leave, right? Or the military component, right? There's always going to be people moving to San Diego because of that. Or biotech, like they're hiring a shit ton of biotech people. So like maybe a microsite might be like San Diego relocationguide.com, San Diego biotech homefinder.com.
And just as viable as ever then.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's less likely to like immediately show dividends like it did back in the day. Like there used to be just like Google search suggests, you go in and you type in FHA loan and you're like, oh, it's saying FHA loan requirements. Well, I'll just get FHAloanrequirements.com, put that up, and now I'm going to show up pretty high for that search, suggested search. That's a little bit less likely to work, but I think like things like a relocation guide could be really helpful. And that's something, if you're a mortgage broker or real estate agent, like it makes sense you'd be able to write a 10-page relocation guide to your area and mention your services and like key in on all the things that, someone would be searching for.
You're going to put an ad budget behind that?
Maybe.
You're going to rely more on organic search with these?
I would likely more rely on organic, but that's not a bad angle to take if you're like trying to figure out like, well, how can I go in and every time I search San Diego home buyer, like it's all these big brands and it says it's $40 a click. Like, what about relocating to San Diego next fall? What does that cost? $5 a click, $4 a click? Maybe you are going after that keyword set and you've got your like San Diego relocationguide.com, local trusted mortgage broker, XX award in the ad, comes to that site, it's got your face, got your guide, download the guide, text me, fill out my form and I'll call you. I'll take care of you. I specialize in helping people relocate to the area. Here's how, here's why. I think that's a good one to bring up.
Yeah. Any specific examples of things that, stories in your past that you think are worth covering, or you feel like we covered it all pretty good already?
I think we've done a good job. I mean, this is a really hard thing to talk about in a small amount of time.
Although you're doing a great job of it.
Because so many of these things we learned over several years, and like it's not an easy business. Just it's a lot harder than insurance to like just pop, or even real estate. Mortgage in particular is difficult from licensing and compliance and like all the things you have to do to provide the service is part of the reason why there's a big check at the end. But it's a hard thing to compete in. And you could throw up an insurance site tomorrow and probably get someone on the phone and flip a term life policy. But mortgage is equally as hard to like market and know the nuances of as it is as to run a business. So I see a lot of mortgage brokers who are like, that example I was talking about earlier, like I've got a $20 million company with a bunch of agents. I know this stuff like nails, like 15 years. He's like, I don't know anything about marketing. I'm stuck. I'm beholden to these, vendors. You could tell that the group would be so smart if they just had the time and the bandwidth to focus on this. And some of the things we've discussed right now, I think, exemplify how difficult it is to do that without having that kind of in-house knowledge or hiring it somehow, or finding an agency that has that sort of expertise. Like this is not something where you're just like, I'll just hire a dude or an agency and they'll do the same thing that they do for my gifts website that they do for my mortgage website. Like it's just not going to work. Like some of the tactics are similar, but there's just so much nuance to the mortgage space, and competitive wise, and then also compliance. Like we haven't really talked about that at all. I'm sure they would know, a mortgage broker would know this. You got to be really careful about what you publish and where, and like as you have your NMLS number on it and on your ads. And I mean, just recently, as we're recording this, like the CFPB came down with this big ruling that like is limited and or restricted completely your abilities to say things like top or best. So you can't be like, I'm the best mortgage broker in San Diego, or top VA loan lenders in this country, in this area. Like you're not allowed to say that, or maybe you get caught up in a class action lawsuit or lose your license. Like these things happen a lot in the mortgage industry. There's a lot of eyes and a lot of scrutiny on them. And that it bubbles over into the marketing as well. And I mean, I've seen mortgage companies get in big trouble for seemingly innocuous things on their websites related to like their forms or the ads that they put out there, et cetera. So to add another layer of complexity, like the compliance side is serious as well.
Yeah, which is exactly why you really want to find somebody that knows the space and can help you navigate it so that it doesn't all fall on the brand themselves.
Absolutely.
And then to that end, Mr. Broughton, if somebody's interested in seeking out your talents and needs a little assistance with lead generation, whether it's in mortgage or some of these other spaces you've worked in, like attorney lead gen or solar, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Text me? No, I don't. I don't have a company website right now, so I don't know, John. Maybe either through this episode, I'm sure my contact information will be there, or Google me and find me.
Elusive.
I'm out there. We've talked about professional exit recently, but the last handful of years after we sold one of our sites, and then I was doing a podcast thing for a while and just been kind of consulting. I do kind of have like an agency with a bunch, like we've got web dev and content and SEO and design, and we do a lot of stuff, but we just haven't like given it a name.
Yeah, well, people are seeking you out is the truth of the matter.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, we've got plenty to do already, but we're always interested in new projects, and especially like via referrals or come in through finding us through ways like this. So I'm happy to always help and always, if not help directly, provide direction on some of this stuff where it's like steer clear of that corner of the universe and talk to this person, because as much as I can talk intelligently about this and from experience, I mean, there's 10 other people I know that know more about the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day of this right now than even myself. So I rely on them a lot and checking in with them, and are usually where I point folks when they're curious.
I guess I know where I'm finding my next guest for
right?
Mortgage Lead Gen.
I've got them for you.
Great, Nate. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Anytime.
Really appreciate it,
Right.
and it's just great to see you, man. Talk soon.